eruption in boxing back in pretty much in quick succession to the prediction video posted earlier today. Accordingly, this is the post-fight reaction, whatever, analysis of the pay-per-view card on ITV Box Office, which just completed just a short while ago. Didn't really catch much of the undercard, so I'm going to focus on the main event. UK grudge match, Chris Eubank Jr. and James DeGale contesting for some IBO Super Middleweight World Championship, which is pretty much an insignificant belt. But the fight, as I guess pretty much the entire boxing fraternity had prognosticated, was extremely disappointing fight in terms of high level, high class operators. The styles clearly didn't match up well. We know the inevitable problems you're going to have with orthodox and southpaw fighters, both jostling for position with their lead foots, momentum coming forward, so inevitably there was going to be head clashes, and the head clashes transpired very early on in the fight. James DeGale, I think, suffered a cut, maybe it may even be as early as the first round, and then Chris also suffered a cut to his right eye. Now, aesthetically, it was a horrible fight. Chris Eubank Jr. just simply clubbed his way to death, flooring James DeGale 3 times. So he was carrying the power in this fight, even though he was a smaller man moving up in weight to 168, and we know during his training camp that his weight is actually in very close proximity to 168. So there's not a lot of water loss or fat loss. So it's roughly a correct reflection of his natural body weight, which I think is actually a very good thing. It means the cerebral fluids in his brain is not depleted to the point in which the brain becomes extremely vulnerable, because scientific studies show that when a fighter has cut 20-25 pounds, when he attempts to rehydrate, the brain doesn't replenish that cerebral fluid. It takes at least 6 days. So they say target the body to somebody who's weight drawn. No, target the head, because he's far more susceptible to being knocked out due to obviously a lack of oxygen and a lack of fluid, which doesn't help the brain in terms of its rotation once the skull is struck. But one thing that was evident in this fight was that James DeGale, for his very herky-jerky style, he lands solitary, clean punches, some nice lead left hands. But as we mentioned in the prediction video, the primary weapon that would have decided the fight was a jab. James DeGale doesn't have a jab, so hence he was unable to keep Junior from implementing that sort of sustained or educated pressure attack as his coach Nate Vasquez was trying to implement, in their sort of new regime. So James was very much using a lot more lateral movement, herky-jerky, but his biggest deficiency is that once he's landed a straight left hand, or partially landed it, or it's blocked, He doesn't try and stop his momentum going forward and holding his feet and shift off to the side, you know, circling to Junior's left to try and take away his jab, being the orthodox fighter. But rather his momentum almost drags him forward until both men will collide, and then rather than trying to fight on the inside, you know, James's objective was just to smother Chris. He didn't show any of the attributes in the Badujak fight where, and to a certain extent in the Rogel and Medina fight, where on the inside he does have some ability. You know, he threw some very good right hooks, especially in the Badujak fight. You know, very good uppercuts he has as well. But he dispensed with any of that strategy. You know, wrestling, grappling, just completely trying to neutralize Chris. He knew that Chris is very wild on the inside. He's just wailing away, you know, uppercuts. So it was aesthetically, it was a very horrible fight. You know, Chris Jr. I did see some slight improvements having a coach for the first time. He was a little bit more calmer, not as wild, and he used his jab quite well. He was trying to pour the jab over James's low lead hand to try and get lead hand control, which was wise, to try and stop James from flicking out with the jab, which is a good idea because you're effectively neutralizing it. So he was using more explosive attacks, and then he would open up with good straight right hands, some actually looping right hands, and some good left hooks. You know, Junior was targeting the body far more than James DeGale, and that was due to his coach drilling that to him during the 1 minute, during the end of every round. Nate Vasquez, his coach, was getting a little bit frustrating with Junior loading up, missing the target, especially with headhunting, wild sort of wailing hooks. He kept just reinforcing that you know, the body was a pretty stationary target. So Junior did slip off to the left, and he was hitting DeGale with some good left hooks to the body. Then when he was pivoting off to the right hand side, he was spinning off and, you know, short right hands to the body. So he showed a little bit better punch variety, punch selection. James DeGale's punch reflexes have all but dissipated. Now, he's only 33 years old and he's not really had that many fights, but that is due. It can only be due to the, you know, the punishment that he's taken, the very hard, difficult fights. His deficiencies are very much self-inflicted. His ring IQ can be atrociously bad at times. Particularly his ring positioning. He's got to know where to move subsequent to throwing punches, but he just completely goes in the wrong direction. So head clashes are going to be inevitable because he's wailing forward, and he was using quite a lot of dirty tactics. I see a lot of punches at the back of the head as well. You know, when the two of them would clash in the middle of the ring, and you know, they were wrestling and jostling for position. You know, James would try and push him down as well. You know, eventually Junior was deducted a point for giving James DeGale quite a vicious rock bottom, slamming him to the ground. And that was utterly stupid to do so. He'd already built up a sufficient lead with the 2 knockdowns beforehand. The first knockdown, a left hook started. DeGale backed into the ropes. It looked like the referee may have awarded the point for the fact that the ropes kept DeGale up, but it wasn't. It was a subsequent right hand, and DeGale's knee touched the ground. So the referee was correct in that side. The second knockdown resulted in, a multi-punch combination, not all landing flush, but wailing wild hooks. DeGale trying to back away, his left hand in Chris's face to try and stop him, but he was futile to do so. He never had the power to keep Chris off him. Chris just pretty much just bullied his way forward. A horrible fight. It was like watching a porno film full of 60-year-old MILFs. There was nothing of any significant quality that'll keep a boxing connoisseur, captivated. Pretty comfortable victory for Chris Jr. I think 117, 109 sounds about right. DeGale, solitary punches, no body attack, no inside work, no punch resistance. His punch reflexes all but shot. Chris Jr.'s offensive attacks are so telegraphed. Very rigid upper body, no flexibility. I didn't see any subtleties to feints. He was a little bit more measured in his attacks, but up against a shot fighter in DeGale, he was pretty much a sitting target. DeGale definitely had the better feet. Chris Eubank Jr. did a horrible job even in cutting off the ring. He does not have good feet. Very flat-footed, very uncoordinated feet, stiff upper body, so he's got a hell of a lot of work. He's got to stop loading up on his punches. He's got to try and set up his attacks. His jab was okay. It got progressively better as DeGale he was getting systematically broken down, suffering knockdowns, so desperation was coming into his work as well. So his boxing became a little bit more erratic. He was a lot more lateral movement, trying to pot shot. Chris trying to use sneaky attacks. But if you have no power to keep your man in the middle of the ring, to actually win his respect, to stop him coming forward, try and set some traps, then you've got to use volume of punches. If single punches are not going to do it, and you're already behind, and you've got to try and fight inside the pocket. You've got to try and open up. Subconsciously, you already knew it was pretty much a retirement fight, so that wasn't really a fighter who laid it all on the line in the middle of the ring. He didn't show any warrior-like mentality for me, although Chris gave him some credit for that, but not in my opinion. That was a defeated man in the ring. A fighter who had, as I mentioned, subconsciously had already felt that he had planted the flag for the United Kingdom, became the first Olympic gold medalist and world champion to represent Great Britain, two-time world champion, so in the back of his mind he had already achieved his goals. So it was almost damage and limitations inside the ring. So yeah, I would strongly advise James DeGale now to retire. Hopefully he's invested his money wisely. I know his mother is his manager, so hopefully she set up a trust account for him so he can go forward in life, settle down, maybe work behind the scenes with some kids. I'm not sure, but he's taken too much punishment, so the severity of the injuries is only going to exacerbate should he continue now. Chris Eubank Jr. is the worst of all the 168-pound fighters, so if he steps in the ring with a Callum Smith or even a Saul Alvarez or Caleb Plant, the outcome will not be favourable for James DeGale, so hang it up now would be my advice. You've had a reasonably good career, so Chris Eubank Jr. is yet to win a legitimate world title, so you can see the comparison between the two fighters. Chris Jr., so the first leg of his PBC deal ends with him actually winning on UK soil, winning his first major fight. He still has a tremendous amount of work to do in the gym. Nate Vasquez and him, it seems to be a reasonably good combination. Nate was very calm, giving actually good instructions. Chris has indicated that he has a great deal of respect for him, so it's still early doors. That relationship can expand and get better. Nate is quite modest in terms of his boxing experience, so which is okay. Not all not all ex-professional fighters are successful trainers. There's no blueprint to what achieves success in boxing, both as a boxer and as a trainer, so maybe there is some sort of competence there. So I'm not sure how they're going to plot Chris's future now, who they're going to put him inside the ring with. He seems very keen on unifications, but I certainly wouldn't advise that. He's 29 years old, he's got a bit of time. He may have had 30 odd fights, but he's still very, very young in his boxing education. He's not really taken a lot of punishment, although he's been beaten comprehensively, but so there's not a lot of wear and tear. He can pace himself a little bit. I would say 2 or 3 competitive fights against guys ranked inside the top 20 definitely, and then if he's able to somehow obtain a unification, I guess Caleb Plant would be a feasible one, who trains at the Mayweather gym as well. A TMT fighter. I'm not sure if Al Heyman advises him as well. He pretty much does for all the PBC fighters, so there shouldn't be too many difficulties in making that fight. It certainly isn't a unification, but it all depends on Plant, what his aspirations and what his goals are. 2 of them are on different sort of trajectories at the moment, so boxing is, we know how frustrating boxing is in trying to predict the future in terms of who's going to fight who and when. So many difficulties, so many obstacles, so much politics, different networks, different countries. Then it comes down to the purses. Now Chris Eubank Jr. is going to say he's the A side, fighting on pay-per-view in the UK. Maybe that'll be a good way of tempting fighters over, but I don't think this pay-per-view would have done very well. The crowd didn't seem that enthralled with the fight. There was booing pretty much throughout the fight as well. Maybe not as vociferous, but I definitely heard booing throughout the fight actually. Lackluster ovation for Chris once the the final cards were read as well. So I don't think the crowd were too pleased overall. But in any case, that's the post-fight for Chris Eubank Jr. and James DeGale. I did say Chris Eubank Jr. would win on points, so corruption in boxing, a professional speculator, I rarely make mistakes. Yeah, so let me know how your opinions of the fight. I'm sure it's not going to be as lackluster as well. Did it go pretty much as planned as you thought, or was Chris better than what you anticipated, or was James DeGale shot as you anticipated? Yeah, drop your comments, be much appreciated. And that'll be it. Corruption in boxing, transmission over.